Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and with the last Guardians of the Galaxy update dropping with Warlock, we have now finished the trilogy of updates for Guardians of the Galaxy, marking the 9.0 and 9.0.5 updates. Now, with June here, now we're into the 2nd of June. We are basically looking forward to either a Secret Wars Nick Fury update, maybe an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. type thing. We have seen some stuff teased by Danny Koo, which I'll make a separate video on. Or I should say, a Spider-Verse update for Spider-Man, or for Miles Morales Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I think it's just Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Amazing movie, by the way. Easily 10 out of 10. Highly recommend you seeing it in theaters. But in the meantime, we do have to go through and rank Adam Warlock, Star-Lord, Rocket, Mantis, Groot, and Gamora, who all did get upgrades, during the last 3 updates. So we're going to check these guys out, talk about them. We're also going to talk about, well, we're briefly going to talk about right now Drax and Nebula, because they didn't get anything. Well, Nebula got an awakening, but that's really not enough, and Drax got literally nothing. Now, before we go ahead and rank the characters, I have 2 things to tell you guys. One is a question, one is a statement. The first one is that I changed the out of the meta, please rework categories, and I just merged them. So previously, out of the meta was these 2 categories, and then please rework was the next 2 categories, or the next 2 columns. I've just merged those columns because, frankly, almost all of the characters in the out of the meta at this point need to be reworked. Even though they got uniforms potentially not that long ago, like Baron Mordo's uniform is only a year old, but it sucks. So straight up, he needs a rework at this point. Same thing goes with other characters here. You know, they're somewhere in the realm of sucking and almost sucking. So yeah, they all just need reworks. Probably not as badly as the ones further to the right. You know, I mean, if you ask me, is Silk better than Elsa? Yeah, Silk is way better than Elsa. But, you know, at this point, they're both behind the 8 ball on the meta. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing is a question. Do you prefer the tier lists like this, or do you prefer the tier lists like this? I know some content creators do this. I know some content creators still do this. I am sort of partial to this one because it's easier to maintain. It's easier to set up. But I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say, because I do all of my other tier lists like this. And this one here is the only one that I do in text form. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know if you prefer text tier list or if you prefer image-based tier lists. So yeah, with that being said, let's kick it off. We have Star-Lord tier 4, Rocket, and Mantis. This was the first leg of the update. Not a very good first leg in my opinion. Star-Lord got a massive upgrade and Mantis did too, but Rocket's was pretty much like, Rocket's was really bad. Rocket's rework was really bad. They didn't change him. They haven't buffed him. So it was really just a one pass and done. His passive, which applies to all Guardians, has no effect for Groot and Gamora, which is frankly completely unacceptable, and there's no way in hell that a Star-Lord, Rocket, Mantis team was ever going to make any noise in PvP, but those are the only 3 characters that can fully synergize based on Rocket's passive. So really, they were up their own asses with Rocket. Unfortunately, that means not only is he, unfortunately means he's not meta, right? Not only is Rocket in a very crowded blast male category, but he's also completely eclipsed and erased by all tier 4 blasts. And this is the issue with Marvel Future Fight at this point. Giving tier 2 characters a tier 3, or giving whatever, you know, upgrading a character to tier 3 or upgrading a character to Transcendence doesn't matter, because there are tier 4s, right? We have tier 4s of all varieties, so unless the character fills some sort of other niche, it's just not going to work. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you take all existing tier 2 characters who are going to tier 3 or Transcend and you make them all supports. That is technically an answer to avoid this problem, but it's also a stupid answer. But on the other hand, yeah, Rocket's just doomed from the beginning. The devs clearly don't know how to release tier 3 characters anymore in a balanced way. I mean, the thing is, they do. Like, if you look at Green Goblin, if you look at, you know, some of Shuri, right? They clearly do. But at the same time, they don't, right? Because then you look at characters like Squirrel Girl and you look at characters like Rocket and they just suck. And you're like, why? The character could have been so much more. So yeah, honestly, Rocket is really just a support, which is really sad to say, but it's honestly true. And he's actually one of the worst supports we have in the game because, like I said, his support passive only applies to 5 characters, which is bananas. It's really low. But then on top of that, it actually only applies to 3 characters, because it doesn't, like, energy attack doesn't do anything for Groot, and it doesn't do anything for Gamora. So Rocket might be one of the worst characters they've ever reworked, because of how ass backwards his rework was, right? Like, they made him a support, but then they were like, nah, let's just make his support as useless as possible, right? Which is pretty disappointing. Mantis, on the other hand, got a pretty solid rework. Not only is she a very strong character in her own right, very proc friendly, very fun to play, very tanky, but she appears to have some value outside of that, being able to be a striker to cleanse debuffs, which is not as useful as healing, but still useful. Pardon my rant video. And also potentially as a tier 4 striker in PvP, believe it or not, being set as the tier 4 ally. So Mantis is certainly in the meta-ish category. Now, how high we're going to put her, I don't know. I think I'm comfortable right now putting her just under Emma Frost. And I say that, you know, knowing how good Emma can be for PvP. But I think this is a pretty good ranking for a character that we didn't expect to be this good at all. We really didn't expect Mantis to be that good, and she really delivered. It's a very, very good rework, very strong rework. The amount of sort of tags next to her name doesn't really illustrate how good she is, but she certainly has a lot of flexible value. She can be built, you know, PvE, PvP. She can be built as a support in a way. Quite a nice character. Certainly not on the level of tier 4s, but certainly much more in line with what we expect power-wise from a tier 3/transcendent. And she certainly competes at the highest level and basically just eclipses the damage of basically every other tier 3 in this meta-ish category. The only reason why she's not higher than Emma Frost and Mephisto is because they have other value, right? Mephisto is a good alternative to like a highly expensive, a highly rare Magneto build, and then Mantis doesn't have as much PvP value as Emma. But honestly, if you value the PvE content over the PvP content, I would put Mantis right at the top. So it really just depends what you value more, PvE or PvP. But yeah, we can go both ways and see how people feel about it. But she's honestly very, very good, and certainly was a surprise for me. And then for Star-Lord, he's the tier 4. He's one of the big. He was the big focus of the initial push of the update. Yeah, not a lot. Like, he has ABL value, so he replaces or competes with or replaces Thor in ABL. But outside of that, he doesn't do that much that he wasn't already able to be done by other characters. Like, yeah, he has the command ability, which is very rare, but Captain America and Storm both have it, so it's not that rare for tier 4s, right? If you compare him to tier 4s. The other issue with Star-Lord is he's massively weak defensively, right? He gets hit very easily and he takes a ton of damage. So he certainly needs the tier 4, and sort of needing the tier 4 to be of value is kind of something that hurts. As far as how you'd compare him to Professor X, which is where I thankfully, or not thankfully, which is where I'm sort of leaning towards putting him in the meta gods category, not in the meta defining category. It's tough. I think in some ways he's better than Professor X. I think maybe he has a bit more AoE. He's a little bit easier to play than Professor X because he's also proc friendly. On the other hand, he doesn't have, you know, I mean, he has a better leadership than Professor X technically. I don't know about survivability. If he's better than Professor X, he might be a little bit better with the tier 4. I think I comfortably I'll rank him a little bit above Professor X, but he's going to be somewhere around here. He's going to be somewhere in this realm. Maybe better than Storm for some situations, but Storm right now is still occupying a very coveted spot for, you know, blast mutant females, right? Or sorry, maybe it's just mutant females, mutant female heroes, something like that. So because of that, you know, she has a little bit more value than he does, and she hits just as hard, if not harder. And although she has similar survivability issues, it basically ends up making them sort of a wash. But yeah, Star-Lord, pretty good with the tier 4. Otherwise, not really sold on his value, unfortunately. And then that leads us into Groot and Gamora. So Gamora also got a tier 4, big upgrade for her. Gamora's probably the standout of the update besides Adam, so that's pretty nice for her to get both of those upgrades and sort of to be in that coveted position. Doesn't really have much PvP value, unfortunately, and we do have to consider Otherworld Battle now more than ever. So I don't want to put her necessarily in meta defining, despite the fact that I do think she's a better Shadow Shell. It's kind of tough. It's kind of tough. I actually think what I'm going to do, and some people are going to hate me for this, I'm going to do this right here. Okay? This is what I'm going to do. Yeah, I think right now speed characters are in a really weird position. I also want to be a little edgy to get people talking, so I'm gonna do that. And you tell me down below in the comments if you agree or not. I mean, well, but Shadow Shell does have Shadow Shell does have more value as far as PvP goes. So maybe Gamora should be beneath her, because you can build a PvP team, especially Otherworld Battle, with Sunbird and Blue Dragon and Shadow Shell if you all give them PvP builds, and you have tier 4 Blue Dragon and tier 4 Shadow Shell. Now that leans a lot on tier 4s there. That leans a lot on tier 4s, but it is still something to consider, and I did say we were considering Otherworld Battle, right, as a 5v5 game mode. Otherworld Battle honestly made me want to bump Spider-Man up, because he seems to be the sort of deciding factor on some of these teams that all have Jean and all have Gore and all have Carnage. You know, these sort of stacked builds. It's like whose Spider-Man ends up being better. But for the time being, I'm going to leave him here. But yeah, I kind of feel like speed types, despite being very good and despite being very useful for content, like they have a lot of value for ABX and ABL, I don't feel like they're really defining the meta. I feel like they're just one-upping each other in terms of damage, you know, tit for tat sort of thing, but they're not actually shifting the meta in any meaningful way. I feel like Spider-Man might be the only one recently that's really shifted the meta. Even Shadow Shell, for as good as she is in ABL, was actually worse than Black Widow in ABX, which absolute head scratcher, right? But it goes to show you how, in my opinion, how inconsistent speed types are. So I'm trying to illustrate how inconsistent they are by doing this. Gamora is still very, very good. I know I said a bunch of bad things about speed types and then I rank Gamora, but she is a speed type. But it's just that speed types are inconsistent in general. But Gamora combines, you know, insane DPS, like very, very high damage, consistent damage, easy to play, proc friendly, lots of healing, very tanky, with the fact that you can then swap her back to a speed villain, which gives you a lot more variety. And then you don't necessarily have to chase other speed villain options. However, you do still want to chase and build other speed villain options, because Green Goblin is the alternative. And Green Goblin's an amazing speed villain, not only in his own right, but also as a leadership and passive. So I weigh Gamora's Requiem uniform a little bit less valuable than usual, certainly less than I weigh like Iron Man's Superior Iron Man uniform, despite the fact that I think Requiem's uniform is probably a little bit better than Iron Man's Superior. The reason for that being, like I said, not as many blast villains to compete with Superior Iron Man these days, besides like, you know, expensive and rare Magneto, versus Gamora Requiem, who has a lot of characters that can compete with her, and especially in the very easy and very cheap to build category of Green Goblin, you know, that sort of writes itself. So that's where I'm going to put Gamora for now. You guys let me know in the comments down below if this is fair to call these characters meta-defining and not call any speed types meta-defining, but I'll stand by this ranking for now. And then we come to Groot. Groot got a nice passive upgrade with the increased damage to boss types, and he got some really cool looking skills, but in my opinion, it doesn't really push him anywhere into the meta. And the thing is, the Guardians themselves are all aliens. The Guardians themselves have sort of wonky typings, which aren't really conducive to very high restrictions of world boss. And here's the thing. Groot's passive that they gave him, the increased passive with boss damage, is for PvE. And it's mainly for world boss. So it's really incongruent. It really actually doesn't synergize with what it's supposed to synergize with, which is really depressing, because then it takes away the value. So as much as I want to put Groot in something like Meta God or Meta-ish, I honestly think he's just a lead / support. You can certainly use him in other ways, and that can absolutely work. He's certainly like much higher DPS than Sif. So it may be unfair. Okay, the more I talk about it, the more it seems unfair. He's proc friendly. He's easy to play. Very tanky. He revives. Like, he has a lot of weapons, but he doesn't have any value for like function game modes like ABX, ABL. He doesn't have very much value there at all. I think maybe you could pair him as a support for Star-Lord. I guess that's the only thing you could do. So yeah, I'd say he's at least meta-ish. Maybe. So then maybe he is better than Titania. I mean, he's certainly better damage-wise than Titania, and he does function as a support. Is he better than Valkyrie? I don't want to go that far. He's really only buffing Star-Lord. Here's the thing. He's really only buffing Star-Lord because for the content that you're going to use Gamora in, it's going to be female content where you won't be able to use Groot as a support anyways. So it's really frustrating to see how they've sort of boxed Groot in, and it really goes to show how the devs aren't really thinking ahead to how they're building the content and how the characters are going to interact with the content. Because for the most part, like look at Rocket and look at Groot, they can't support Gamora and Star-Lord where you need them to support Gamora and Star-Lord the most, right? So the justification for building these characters gets lower and lower the more you think about it. So yeah, I'll put Groot there for now. He might be a little bit higher, he might be a little bit lower. I think maybe I overreacted thinking of putting him in just lead support, and it's more a reflection of how irritated I am with the devs for building such contradictory characters, right? And then we come to the big bad at the end, Adam Warlock. I know I don't have him level 80 yet. He's still level 70, but I think it would be foolish to rank him anywhere other than meta defining. I think this dude is going to be an absolute monster. He's going to be a massive headache for lots of different players, and he's certainly going to do some damage. Now, how much damage he does is really going to be up for debate, but I think right now it's pretty reasonable to put him right here. I'm going to undervalue him a little bit, but I am going to put him here for now and see what happens, and see how he sort of develops and see especially how he tracks at level 80 and tier 4 in PvE. We know he's going to be a PvP powerhouse, right? We know he's going to be second or third overall, which is a massive upgrade for him and certainly puts him in the conversation, right? But we have to see how well he performs at tier 4 in PvE content, how well he does in things like GBR, because that's going to then define whether or not he climbs above Magneto, because Magneto has the ABX, ABL slots locked right now, right? He's got those motherfuckers on lock. So Adam needs to show value in other content to really rise above that and really rise to maybe challenge Blue Dragon or maybe even challenge Iron Man. I know saying that Iron Man looks like he shouldn't be at the top. I still like him because he swaps over to a villain and that flexibility is just worth so much. But for the time being, yeah, we'll keep this where it is. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of the tier list and also answer that question, por favor, whether you want the text-based tier list or whether you want the image-based tier list. Thank you so much for watching. Hit me up down below in the comments with your thoughts. Smash the like button. It supports the channel out tremendously. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.